Welcome to Riding Counsel with Rich Jaffe, where the open road meets expert advice. I'm Richard Jaffe, an attorney and biking enthusiast, and this is the podcast where we dive into the world of motorcycling, safety, culture, charitable giving, and riding right. So, whether you're a seasoned rider or just getting started, let's talk bikes, the road, and everything in between. Let's ride! All right. Hello, everyone out there. This is Rich Jaffe from ridingcounsel.com. And I am a lawyer who practices personal injury. I am a podcaster and I'm a motorcycle enthusiast. And I want to throw a question out there to everyone right in the start. If you pull over and you see, because you see a biker in trouble, maybe they crashed, maybe something bad happened, their bike blew up or something like that. And in the process of going to try to help them, you get hurt. What happens? Who can you sue, if anyone? And this is what's known as the Danger Invites Rescue Doctrine. And this is what we're going to explore today. So if this is your first episode listening, I really appreciate you coming on and listening. And if you're a follow-up listener, I really appreciate you too. So please do me a favor, like, subscribe, share, and let me know what you want to hear. If you leave a comment down below, I respond to every single comment. So leave a comment down below. But before we jump into this, I also want to introduce my good friend and co-host. His name is Million. Million, how you doing? What's up?
Million checking in from Las Vegas. Millian. Hope everyone is well. We're doing okay out here. I got to tell you, I am so excited for this topic for no other reason than I just love the name. That should be a movie. It's like, danger in a world where there's danger, rescue is invited. Richard Jaffe. You should be the star of that movie. That is so cool. I love the name. I have no clue what we're talking about, but I love the name. So I'm in.
Danger Invites Rescue. It's pretty hot. Like I maybe like on a T-shirt. I mean, I have my Riding Counsel T-shirt on. Oh yeah, Riding Counsel T-shirts in the house. Maybe I'm gonna make some T-shirts. Danger Invites Rescue. Maybe that's pretty cool. But it happens more than you think. Somebody gets hit, somebody gets hurt on a motorcycle or a car even, but a lot of times the motorcycles get hit by cars and the motorcyclist gets maybe knocked into the woods, who knows, and in the process you go and you try to rescue the person and you get hurt in the process of rescuing them. Can you sue anybody? And most of the time the answer is yes, because danger invites rescue. And the courts in almost every state have some type of doctrine just like this called Danger Invites Rescue. They might not use the exact words, but it's the value of human life. The law values human life. So they don't want to discourage you from, jumping in there and trying to help somebody. And, if you do and you get hurt, you can blame the person who originally caused the accident.
So in New York, which is your kind of main area as well as others, how is it treated there? Like how do the courts recognize it? Is it what's like the general guidelines to invite rescue?
Well, so there's a couple of parts to this doctrine, if you will, of Danger Invites Rescue. First of all, it's not a law, meaning that it's not a statute, it's not written down, but it is developed over time, over case law that dates back even before 1900. So some of the cases go back to like the late 1800s, and then it developed thereafter. And it's the value of human life, and as time went on, the courts kind of underscored this as being valuable. But you can't just sue for anything and say, well, I was trying to help this guy out. There has to be what's known as a reasonable perception of a danger. Right. So if there's not a reasonable perception of a danger, then, this whole doctrine goes out the window and you can't sue anybody. But, what is reasonable? It's really a question of fact that can be decided by a judge, a jury. But, look, if somebody's pulled off on the side of the road and they're looking okay and there's no danger, then there's no real danger perceived. It's not really reasonable for you to say, well, I was going to go rescue him. But you can pull off and help somebody, but this reasonable thing has to come into play at some point.
Yeah, and as you were saying, what just kind of stood out to me is that it's not specifically a law, but much like in court cases, judges rule on things and it sets precedents, and that people kind of get into that. As I was researching up on this, I saw there was a case from 1921 called Wagner that wasn't New York specific, but it started influencing all the jurisdictions around this. And so that's why it's, like I say, more judge made than statutory, but that's a legit way to still determine how things get done by, previous court precedents.
Right. So it's a concept called stare decisis. I don't know why everybody has to use Latin when it comes to law, but I guess that's the reason why law schools charge what they do. So I should have taken Latin before I went. In any event, stare decisis essentially says that prior case law, prior decisions from judges, usually serve as the basis for future decisions. So and it has to go by jurisdiction, of course, too. So if you're in New York, then you got to follow New York case law. If you're in Nebraska, you follow Nebraska case law. But this kind of doctrine, as I said, it's not called danger invites rescue in every single state, but there's something very similar to that wording in every state.
Why would courts want to really protect rescuers in this case? I mean, there's obvious reasons, but is there any further legal reasons why a third party jumping in? Because we were talking like Good Samaritan, which has we can compare and contrast, but in this particular case, why is there precedent for this?
Well, it's because the courts based their decision upon what society deems appropriate and proper. And, I think the courts what they're reaching out and saying is we value human life. And if you see somebody who's in danger, go and try to help them. And they don't want to discourage that. Now, if the danger was caused by a negligent party who will be the defendant, then the person who is hurt in the process of trying to rescue the hurt person, then you can sue the defendant. So you do have a cause of action. So it's not that you're just going to get hurt and, there's nobody to sue. You're protected. So they really do want to encourage people helping other people. And that goes sort of hand in hand with the Good Samaritan law, which we sort of covered in another episode.
So compare it. How is it different than the Good Samaritan law? Because it's in all cases, we have somebody jumping in here, right?
Right. So the Good Samaritan law is essentially if you are helping an injured victim and by accident you hurt the injured victim, then the injured victim cannot sue you for hurting them in the process of trying to help them, so long as your actions are reasonable. Now, of course, if you go and stab them with a knife, that's not really protected because that's intentional. But if you act reasonably and you go and you try to help somebody, like if you give them CPR, let's say, and you crack a rib, and the person who's injured that you just saved by CPR and you crack their rib, tries to sue you, you can't be sued because you're covered by the Good Samaritan law. So that protects you from being sued. The other side of the coin is this danger invites rescue, and danger invites rescue is all about protecting you while you're in the process of trying to rescue somebody. So it gives you, the rescuer, a cause of action against the party who actually caused the danger to begin with. So whereas one, which is the Good Samaritan law, protects you from being sued, the danger invites rescue actually gives you the right to sue somebody for the injuries that you sustain. So one is more of a shield, the other one is sort of a sword.
Got it. We talked clearly about motorcycles specifically, but you did mention car accidents and things such as that. In relation to what we do here, what kind of cases typically involve the danger invite rescue doctrine? Like what kind of practical applications would we see this?
So I actually had a case like this. It was more than 2 decades ago, but it was a little scary. I mean, it was actually kind of horrible. But what happened was I guess it was an oil tanker or they had some sort of flammable liquid. It was a big tanker that actually was cut off by another vehicle, and the tanker ended up losing control and going off the road. Oh, wow. And the driver was trapped inside, and the tanker, the truck, actually started to go into flames. So somebody pulled off the road and tried to save the person who was in the truck, and the truck started to catch more and more on flames, and there was a big explosion. Both people survived,
Mhm.
but they were really badly burned and really badly hurt. So both of them were able to sue the car that caused the accident. So the driver and the owner of the vehicle who actually caused the accident. So that's actually a real world practical situation where this kind of doctrine comes into play.
Are there any like notable cases that have come up recently? Because we talked about Wagner a while ago. In New York, has there been any like more famous cases where this has happened in recent times that we would know, or is it just kind of like applies to more low level stuff? Like how do we actually see this in the real world?
So I'm not really aware of very, like landmark decisions about this, right? So nothing that I know of has gone to like the United States Supreme Court. They're deciding about, whether or not we can sue or not sue based upon this doctrine. But it does happen once in a while. I don't come across it often, and oftentimes people are not aware of it.
Mm.
So I think it's important that people out there actually know that if you go and try to help somebody, then you're not going to be sued. And if you go and try to help somebody and you hurt yourself, you are actually protected because you have a cause of action against the person who actually caused the whole thing to begin with. So it's a message that really has to get out there. And it also sort of goes hand in hand with what the motorcycle community really knows already, right? So if you're a biker and you're out there and you see a helmet on the ground, of course, that means that a biker is in distress and you should stop. But bikers always stop for other bikers to try to help out.
Mm.
I just went to Ocean City, Maryland, and I went down for Bike Week for 4 or 5 days, and driving back to New York, I actually passed a couple of bikers who were pulled off on the side of the road. They didn't look like they were in distress, but I gave them the thumbs up, indicating to them like, look, if you're okay, then give me a thumbs up too. And both of them did, but I would have stopped. And I also saw a couple of bikes that were pulled over to the side that there was already a group of bikers that were stopped. So bikers are really good about that. And there's nothing really like the biker community. I think they're the most charitable, the most giving, and really the most thoughtful community out there.
Mhm. I would assume, because we're talking about like car accidents, motorcycle accidents, does this apply across the board? Like somebody's on a construction site and something happens, or you go into a place of business and someone's in trouble and you step in. Does it apply to that as well? Or are we just talking automobile or vehicles?
Well, it does apply to people across. It doesn't really matter the situation, so long as it's not something intentional or criminal. So if you could prove that somebody was negligent, meaning somebody did something wrong, then yeah, you have a cause of action against that person if you're hurt and trying to rescue somebody. But where it doesn't really apply, and this is sort of a tricky situation, is if you are a first responder. So if you're a police officer, if you're a firefighter, if you're an EMT, and you're essentially, your responsibility is to go rescue somebody, that's what your job is,
Mhm.
then you're not really covered by this. There's other
Right.
laws that you are covered by, okay, because there's like the firefighters rule in New York and a bunch of other things that will protect you, but it's not a danger invites rescue kind of law that will protect you.
So that's in a case of trying to help an individual. So, like in the firefighter or police, whatever the case may be.
Right.
If there was another situation where maybe you're trying to save property, like a runaway car is about to crash into a storefront, you may or may not know if somebody's in the line of the car or whatever. You get injured trying to stop the car crashing into property. Are you still covered under that, or is it only if you help a person?
Right. Okay. So this is a really interesting situation that you just bring up, right? So let's say a car is rolling into a store. Somebody didn't put it in park, or I don't know what. But the whole basis of this danger invites rescue thing is if you have a reasonable belief that somebody is going to get hurt. So it's not something, it's somebody. Now, when a car is starting to roll out of control, to me, it's pretty darn reasonable to think, hey, there could be somebody in the way of this car, so I really better stop this. And if you get hurt, I think you do have a cause of action. But if it's just for property, let's say, you know, I mean, I'm a dog guy, right? I love dogs. So but dogs in New York are considered property.
Mhm.
So if it's just to save a dog, then you're not going to be able to use it. It has to be
Mhm.
somebody, not something. So it really doesn't apply to property that you're rescuing, just property. But if in the process of rescuing you do save the property, that's okay, of course. But it has to be a reasonable belief that someone is in danger. So not something.
As we were starting the episode here, and we kind of broke it down, we talked about the negligence creating a dangerous situation. Now, and make sure I'm understanding this correctly. If somebody is quote unquote negligent, it's a case where maybe they're like not paying attention, not necessarily like willfully doing something, but they still cause a problem. In a situation where somebody intentionally causes a problem, I don't know, some nut wants to drive his car into like a dealership because he got a bad deal or something like that. I don't know the term for that. So I guess the opposite of negligence or intentionality or whatever you might call
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
How does that it still apply the same way? I would assume because the law or the doctrine, I guess we call it, says negligence, and people split hairs on this kind of stuff. So
Well,
when
I
something's
wouldn't
willful.
be I wouldn't be so sure about that, because if it's caused by somebody who intentionally does something, then I don't know if the doctrine is really going to apply. I could tell you that insurance companies will not cover somebody who acts intentionally. So if you sue somebody, who has a bad day and crashes their car into a store,
Mhm.
that sounds pretty intentional. And the bad thing is that, there's not going to be insurance for you to sue. So you could still sue, but you're not going to recover anything unless this person like won the lottery or something like that. Maybe you get 5,000 or 10,000, or try to like somehow garnish their wages. But if you don't have a deep pocket to get the money to begin with, then what's the point? It's you can't get blood out of a stone. That's the saying. So you really got to couch your terms legally in a very specific way. So intent may or may not play a big role in how you pursue this. And also you have to understand that you have to consider where it happened, because each state has its own qualifications, right? So this is like a general doctrine that we're talking about. But let's say somebody like in Alaska wants to follow this kind of doctrine, it's going to be different in Alaska than it is, say, like Wyoming or something like that. So you really have to pay attention to the actual wording of the law as it's phrased by the courts.
So if you had a situation where someone was maybe not necessarily negligent or intentional, it just like a situation that happened, like someone's in a swimming pool and they need to someone jump in and rescue them, for instance. In a situation like that, you try to save a stranger, they get hurt. Does this doctrine apply when like the original danger itself wasn't necessarily negligence?
Well, that's a very tricky situation. So let's say, I mean, if there's a lifeguard on duty and the lifeguard didn't really act appropriately, that's a form of negligence. That's called an omission, meaning that they failed to do something. If the lifeguard went in and didn't rescue the drowning victim, properly, then that's an act of commission, right? So they did something wrong. So in those two circumstances, maybe you can prove negligence. If let's say it's a pool, there should have been a lifeguard there, then again, it's an act of omission because somebody might have been able to prevent this. But if you're just like swimming in the ocean or something like that, and really a lifeguard is not supposed to be there to begin with, and they start drowning and you go out there, really there's nobody to sue because it wasn't really caused by anybody. So you can't really sue like a third party. I mean, the only person you could sue is really the drowning victim, and what they do wrong.
Yeah. Or, okay, let's take another direction with this one. In a case where maybe we can't find who's negligent, like a hit and run situation. So there's that. It causes someone's negligence, cause that danger in that situation. You step in. What do you do in situations where they don't know who's negligent or can't find them or something?
Yeah, super tough. If you don't have anybody to sue, then you're unfortunately out of luck. So you can try to sue somebody like that. In New York, there's all kinds of loopholes that you can do. There's an entity called MVAC, right? It stands for Motor Vehicle Accident Indemnity Corporation, and that's essentially the state, New York State, trying to protect its own citizens. And almost every other state in the country has something like this. So if you don't have a car in the household and there's nobody else to sue, then you can ask the state and say, hey, can you please compensate me? But it's something very minimal, and it's super hard to do. There's a lot of requirements. That's maybe a possibility, but I don't think this doctrine is really going to apply. So we're talking narrower and narrower of a possibility to actually recover under this doctrine.
In that same scenario now, if you rescue that person, let's say it was a car situation, couple cars, and you step in, you got invited to danger, and you rescued that person, their particular insurance, if they have like uninsured motorist, underinsured motorist, things like that, do you have any cases there?
Well, okay, so an uninsured or underinsured motorist kind of policy, probably it's an extremely fact-specific kind of thing. Okay, first of all, it comes out of the use or operation of a motor vehicle, okay, if it involves motor vehicles, and therefore no fault in New York is probably going to apply because and that'll cover the medical bills. But as far as for pain and suffering, you could try to go uninsured motorist, but there's a lot of other factors that you have to consider. First of all, it has to be reported to the authorities within 24 hours. And second of all, there's a lot of other proofs that you have to provide, and you have to put the insurance company on notice. But, that's the argument, that danger invites rescue and that you can go uninsured motorist. And then it would be the uninsured motorist insurance company who would probably have to try to subrogate against the bad person if they ever found the bad person. But, you'd have to be a really innovative attorney and know what you're really doing. Not saying that, other people aren't, but I know I am. So if you ever want to call me, you can do that. Okay. You can always find me at ridingcounsel.com, ridingcounsel.com. And I'm going to post my information down here. Anybody who's watching. And I also appreciate if you like, subscribe, and share. It really would mean a lot to me. I really want to get the word out. But hopefully the lawyer you hire knows what the heck they're doing.
Listeners out there too, if you would please leave a comment if you've actually been in this situation or have been involved in some way in a situation. We would love to hear that. We could take a look at it and kind of analyze it and see what we think of that particular case. So make sure while you're liking and subscribing and all that stuff, drop a comment down there. We try to answer everything, so we shall do that. So, I think we talked about something before, and I can't quite remember what it was, but like my mind goes all over, like I'm trying to be innovative like this is, okay, so we have the underinsured, uninsured, homeowners insurance. Could we get that to cover it if like the moon and stars align just right? Could we get that involved?
There is some case law out there in New York and probably in other states that you really can try to get the homeowners policy on the line, right? Because boy, it's really tough, because if somebody hits you and they don't have any insurance and you want to get more insurance, what you essentially have to allege is that it was the unintentional result of an intentional act. Okay. You want to split hairs. Mm-hmm. And that is a trigger for the insurance company to come in and at least defend the person who you're suing. Whether or not they're going to indemnify, meaning pay, man, that's a whole different story. You really it's an uphill battle with that. But there's a lot of sources, and when you have big bad injuries, there's all these places that you really have to turn over every single rock, every single stone to look. And it's pretty easy for lawyers to get lazy on this and just say, look, this is it, you got the minimum, be happy with it, but you have to look everywhere. And it's really important that your lawyer knows what they're doing. Like if you try to hire a real estate lawyer who says, yeah, I can handle this kind of thing, they're probably not going to even know, what this danger invites rescue kind of thing is. And then let alone like the little idiosyncrasies of this practice, they're just not going to know. So be careful, people, be careful. Danger invites rescue. And I don't want to have to go rescue you from this danger of getting an attorney who doesn't really know what the heck they're doing.
That's a mighty dangerous situation because I just, like I said, I think all over the place. And we said earlier, so situation, there's a dog involved. Now, a lot of people they'll go farther for a puppy than they will for a human,
Yeah.
So this will happen. And I know, like here in Nevada, for instance, your car is considered an extension of your house. It's considered that. I'm sure it is other places as well. So if you have property in your house then I would assume car, dog, house, homeowners insurance. Could we tie these three together? That's how I think like in
Right.
that direction. So, that's why I was asking, do we have something? I assume you can go for it. And I would imagine too, that if you really went crazy and you went for like a big lawsuit, they'd be like, "Look, can we just give you a check and get you out of here and call it a day? Let people just want to settle and get you out of there. Just keep it between
Sometimes,
yourselves. Here's a check. Just shut it and go."
sometimes it boils down to like a business decision like that. Sometimes it does, but you really got to know what you're doing. And again, you have to find somebody who it was the negligent party, because if you don't have a negligent party, or at least a potential negligent party, then there's nobody to sue. So the doctrine really wouldn't come into play. So there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of pieces to put together the puzzle, and you really got to know.
Okay, a meteor hits your car.
Right.
Now we have what's called an act of God. What do we do then?
Nothing you can do. Act
Yeah.
of God, man. Not covered. Not covered in like almost any instance. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe like your car insurance or something, but there's nobody to sue. So I don't think God could be negligent. I don't know. I got to read the rules up there.
He tends to win his cases a lot. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
Him and Chuck Norris.
yeah, don't sue Chuck Norris. That's very bad.
I tried once. I got a heel to my face.
Yeah, still waiting on that settlement, and we'll be waiting a long time. I hear the term, because we keep bringing up negligence. So I think of the term comparative negligence. And from what I understand, it's just a percentage of who's responsible for what. How would something like a comparative negligence work in a case like this? Like same as any other situation, or does it diffuse in some way? Is it weighted heavier or not? How do they look at this?
Well, first you have to understand that some states are not comparative states. So that means
Okay.
either the defendant is completely negligent, or if the plaintiff is like 1% responsible for his or her injury, then the plaintiff is out of the box. Okay. So you got to understand that other states are comparative negligent states. So you look at both parties and you say, okay, this guy was 75% responsible, the other guy 25 or 60-40, or any mix of that. Okay. So then you got to go over that hump. But aside from that, the case law that I've seen, and maybe there's some other case law out there, I have not seen any comparative negligence attributed to somebody who is suing under the danger invites rescue doctrine. So I can't really imagine somebody saying that they're negligent for trying to rescue somebody. I think a better defense may be that it wasn't a reasonable belief that someone, not something, but someone was in danger. So I think that's maybe their better argument. So I don't know how you could be comparatively negligent saying, oh my God, I really think somebody's in trouble and I better go rescue them. I have to try to think of that scenario.
So in that same vein, what like defenses or limitations would a defendant have against a claim under this doctrine? How would you defend something like this?
Yeah, so it's I think it's extremely hard. Okay, first you have a lot of problems with conflict of interest, right? Because on one hand, you want to say that the person who caused the accident wasn't, like maybe it was intentional, because if it was intentional, then the insurance company doesn't have to pay. So the insurance company wants to say it was intentional, because if it was intentional, then the insurance company doesn't have to pay. But at the same time, the insurance company has a responsibility to defend the person who was negligent. So you can't really blame them and say, okay, well, it was intentional, and, open them up to liability. At the same time, no, it was negligent. So, you got to like choose one. Okay. So that's an exposure. Then you have the problem of, trying to say that, they shouldn't sue. They shouldn't sue, and they don't have any right of recovery. So I guess the only real viable defense here is that the belief that someone was in danger was not reasonable. So you have to prove the someone versus something, like was it property or person? And then was it reasonable or not reasonable? Maybe it was like egregious, or, somehow misperceived so incredibly recklessly that they put themselves in danger. But those are the only two real defenses that I see. And maybe somebody out there, leave a comment if you see another defense, because I certainly don't.
Yeah, leave a comment. Well, let's set some precedent. Let's do our own. We'll call it the
make me
writing
the
counsel.
fool. Yeah, make me the fool.
That's it.
But I got to tell you, Million, we're gonna have to wrap up. I mean, this is a really interesting topic for me. So maybe if people comment enough and they want me to come back and start talking about it more, I'd love to do it. But in the meantime, do me a favor, everybody, please don't forget, please like, subscribe, and share. It really would mean the world to me, and it keeps me going.
Leave a comment. Leave a comment. Don't forget.
Yeah, leave a comment. Leave a comment. Leave a story. I will respond to you. And if you want to see something specific on here, do that too. But until the next episode, I have some good juicy stuff coming up. I want everybody out there to ride safe, ride free, ride crazy, but do so legally, everybody. All right, you take care.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Riding Counsel with Richard Jaffe. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the ride, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your fellow riders. Until next time, keep the rubber side down and ride safe.